Okay, hello, Tom Maguire. So, quick review on 50 Cent's new book, Hustle Harder, Hustle Smarter. So, I'm going to talk about why he is quite possibly the new king of personal development, the new king of self-help. I'm going to talk about what his biggest challenge is when it comes to his own personal development. And I'm going to give you what, in my humble opinion, is the best chapter in the whole book as well. This is just really good. It's if you've read the 50th Law that he did in collaboration with Robert Greene, the guy that's done such books as Mastery and the 38 Laws of Power or 48 Laws of Power actually, Laws of Human Nature as well. That's a brilliant book, Laws of Human Nature, I love that. But 50th Law with Curtis Jackson with 50 Cent was really, really good. Combination of the two I think is fantastic. Robert Greene, absolutely amazing author, has dedicated his life to writing and to researching that sort of stuff, so it's absolutely brilliant. But you bring 50 Cent in, it just brings another dynamic, just makes it really interesting, which is why I was pretty keen to read this book when it came out, Hustle Harder, Hustle Smarter. I kind of thought it'd be interesting to see what it's like with him just kind of writing on his own, talking about himself. And he just gives us a really good kind of overview of his life, his upbringing, the stuff that he's been through, the kind of life he's had that most of us just can't even begin to kind of relate to really, but it's just really interesting getting that insight. And he's basically just giving a really good advice on personal development basically. If you listen to what he says and you take it serious and you kind of implement it in your life, and you're likely to do, if not really well, you're going to find improvements in your life, because he's basically very much talking about what I always talk about on this channel, which is standing up, taking personal responsibility for everything that you do, pushing yourself, having a growth mindset, making mistakes, learning from them, picking yourself back up and carrying on again. Basically, it's all that traditional sort of stuff. So in that respect, there's nothing massively new, but it is interesting hearing it come from him and hearing it, how he's used it to get to where he is today. I had no idea he was so involved in the TV series Power as well. So he was executive producer of that. I know he kind of starred in it because I watched it with my wife, and we both thought it was absolutely brilliant. It's one of the best things on TV recently. It's really, really good. And I thought he was great in it, even though you could barely understand what he was saying. But I think that's probably half the point. But he was really, really good. I didn't realise he was so involved. You know, one of the top men in it. Absolutely brilliant. And he talks about all the different projects that he's been involved with. He talks about the work that he does for charity as well, the amount of money he gives to charity and stuff, which is really good. His respect he's got for Bill Gates and people like that as well. There's all stuff that I found pretty impressive listening to. Narrated by him as well on the audio version, which is really good. He speaks a lot more clearly than he does in Power, so it's easy to understand. It's easy to get through. It's easy listening. But with some really good advice, basically. If you're an entrepreneur or business person or whatever, really good advice. So he talks about the fact that his biggest challenge is his family. So everything that he's achieved after being shot 9 times, after having all these enemies and coming from nothing and having this huge success, his biggest challenge, he says, is his family. So he said it's the one thing that causes him anxiety and problems. And he ran into his son once in a shop in New York, and they ended up having this big argument, and his son ran off. And he just talks about how he just can't cope. He can't understand it. He can't cope with it. And he says how, I think I'm saying this rightly, that eventually when he becomes a grandparent, hopefully he'll be a good grandparent to his kids, and he'll consider himself to have succeeded. But so that's cool. It's just interesting to see that someone as successful as him struggles with something that maybe most of us don't necessarily struggle quite so much with. We struggle with the other stuff. So it's kind of interesting seeing it flipped, and how obviously his difficult upbringing, being brought up by his grandparents in a house full of alcoholics and stuff, and obviously the difficult things he had to go through. He lost his mum as well at a young age, which sounded absolutely horrendous. All those things have kind of shaped him and meant that he's got anxiety and difficulties around family, basically, which that was really interesting to hear. He talks about how clean he lives, so he doesn't drink, he doesn't do drugs, which I found really interesting. And also it's a really good message, I think, for young people as well. But in terms of personal development, it's a really important one. He talks about how he now realises that sleep is more important as well, and how he intends to implement getting more sleep so he can be more productive again. He talks about when he's employed people, setting his ego aside. So if there's someone who's got a personality that might not be what he would normally consider to be kind of his cup of tea, shall we say, he'll set his ego aside and just say, well, that person's really good at this or really good at that, so I'm going to utilise them, I'm going to put them in place. I'm going to get over the fact that I might not like this aspect of the personality, but I'll keep an eye on it. You know, I'm kind of street smart. I know that if they're gonna mess me around, I'll be there quickly to jump on it. So I thought that was quite good. The best chapter, though, that I said I would talk about is the Entitlement Trap, as far as I'm concerned, at the end of the book. So everything builds up to this. He talks about the fact that he, again, with his son, he can't understand his sense of entitlement. He can't understand people who believe, I think it's his ex-girlfriend or wife, ex-girlfriend, I think it might be the one who he had his first son with, probably, how she turns around and says, like, nobody's going to want to work if they don't have to. And he says he just doesn't relate to that. He's just a worker, he's a hustler, he just works as hard as he possibly can in every possible way. His goals might change, his kind of priorities might change, but he wants to work as hard as possible, to do as well as possible. He wants to continually grow, and he can't understand people who just expect it to happen. He talks about people who he grew up with. He says it's not necessarily a race thing or a culture thing or a money thing. It's probably just, he sees it as maybe it's a problem in America. I'd agree that it's a problem in England as well to a certain extent. People have this immature attitude that they deserve more, that once, if they do a day's work, they deserve to then drink 10 pints down the pub, or they deserve to go on holiday how many times a year because they've done some work. And it's like, okay, that's one way of looking at it. But he goes on to talk about how in foreign countries you'll find that people are just have quite a different attitude. They'll be working 2 or 3 different jobs, and they'll be kind of hustling and working as hard as they possibly can with the attitude that they'll get themselves further on. They'll get themselves out of trouble and they'll find success that way. Whereas in the kind of more Western, maybe more spoilt kind of advanced countries, I suppose, like the US, like England, you're much less likely to find that attitude. It's much more this self-entitlement trap that people have got into. So it's really interesting hearing him talk about that, and interesting hearing that he's completely against all that, because that's critical as far as I'm concerned for personal development. You can't go around thinking that you're owed anything. The universe, the world doesn't give a toss what you think you're owed. You know, you're basically owed nothing. If you want something, you've got to work at it, and you've got to go and find it for yourself. And even then, you might work really hard and you might still fall flat on your face. That's just life. So it's about taking responsibility. He's really hammering home that point. Really good the way he's brought his own personal life into it, his upbringing, like I say, his own little difficulties, his challenges that he's facing. And it just felt like a really honest, kind of open account of his life with fantastic advice the whole way along, basically. Like I say, Power, fantastic TV show. He's done loads of stuff over the years, hasn't he? If you're a fan of 50 Cent, that you'll know a lot more than me. I'm not, I'm not into hip hop. I'm not going to make any bones about that. But I do remember seeing him kind of growing up and thinking like he was pretty cool compared to a lot of them. I like the fact that he was a bit more edgy and a bit kind of, he seemed pretty confident. He never really came across as, I think he kind of always came across to me as the way he's come out in this book in a way, actually. I always kind of saw him as someone who was just kind of focused and less bullshitty than a lot of people. Whether that's me saying that with hindsight now or not, I don't know, but I think that's the feeling I probably had. He talks about at some point the deal that he made with vitamin water. Those vitamin, I don't even see them anymore in England necessarily, but I think they are still around probably. I think he made like millions out of that basically, and he kind of talks about how he approached them, and they weren't necessarily sure to begin with because they were unsure with his image, being someone who'd been shot 9 times and been dealing drugs growing up and stuff like that, whether they wanted him attached. But he basically went in very humble, just explained what it is that he could do for them, and just basically talked about the importance of being humble and just kind of showing people and explaining to people what you're going to do. But also he kind of says never come across as desperate as well, which is really good advice. So he talks about if you're going for a job interview or something like that, make sure you're clued up about it, make sure you bring as much possible value to it, but don't come across as desperate. Try to come across that what he says is try to come across that you don't need it, basically. So it's a bit like me doing these videos, really. I don't need you to like them or to subscribe. Please like and subscribe. No, seriously. Doesn't really make a lot of difference to my life. If you do, it'd be cool, to be fair. I like to see the odd like, I like to see the extra subscribers. I'm only on 50 at the minute, so feel free. But yeah, you don't necessarily need it. You're happy as you are. If you're happy, then go in with confidence, go in. Although he does make the point, actually, maybe you might be in a situation where you're desperate for it, you've got credit card debt and stuff, and this job might give you a bit more money each year to pay that off, so you might be really, really keen to do it. But try to kind of suppress those emotions and make sure they don't come out in the interview. And I think that was good advice. People are just turned off by that sort of thing, basically, aren't they? If I'm interviewing someone for my company or whatever, and they're there sort of desperately trying to please, and you just sort of think, it's just a turn off. It just puts you off, and you start to question their reason for wanting to do it as well. But basically, highly recommend this book, Hustle Harder, Hustle Smarter, 50 Cent, Curtis Jackson. Fantastic book for personal development. Fantastic book just for entertainment as well. Highly recommended. I'd say 4.5 stars, I'd say. Yeah, and that's, to me, that's really good. I mean, 5-star books hardly really exist at all. There might be the odd one, but 4.5 for this, I'd say.